One of my best friends from medical school, he's a radiation oncologist, suffered lifelong depression, anxiety, OCD, and was on multiple different medications and was suicidal. And he wrote me a suicide note. And we were able to work with his providers to taper down his medications. We got him treated with ketamine, and after the 4th dose of ketamine, he was no longer suicidal.
Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurs Recovery. I'm very excited that you are here on this New Year's Eve, getting to the last moments of 2024. And I hope you're having an amazing last day of 2024. And what I would think about doing is actually asking yourself some questions that will enable you to reflect on 2024. And one of the first questions you can ask yourself is just reflecting on all of the wins that you had in 2024. What were some of the wins, the highlights, the peak moments, but also reflecting on what are some of the learning opportunities? What are some of the, you can call them failures, but I would call them learning opportunities and learning moments, and reflecting back over both. And what did you learn from both of those experiences? So this is just a reminder to take the time to grab a pen, grab something to write on, and reflect on 2024 so you can anchor in those moments that were incredibly impactful. Because I know many of you have had a tremendously challenging 2024. And I mean all around, whether it's back home in the States or in Costa Rica. I've talked to many people, and they have had quite a year. So take the time to reflect, and I hope you have an incredibly safe 2024 New Year's Eve. With that said, I want to introduce my next guest, who is Dr. Dana Lerman, who is the founder and medical director of Skylight Psychedelics. They are doing some amazing work. I'm going to save a lot of this information about what we talked about in this episode. I just have to say I'm blown away by Dana's vulnerability as a medical doctor to share about her journeys and psychedelic medicines, the information she has about psychedelic integration, and just the amazing work that Skylight Psychedelics is doing. And I'm just so grateful to share this episode. So I hope you all enjoy this next episode. Hello, Dana. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here. And you're another one of my guests that I recently met. And I think that's really exciting because I'm going to get to know you a lot better through this episode. And I've listened to you on the Psychedelic Today's podcast. It was a great podcast. And now I have you on my show, and we can go and expand and go maybe even deeper and further into some of these things that I'm interested in and you're interested in. But just welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited. Let's go deep and far and deep.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we want to do on Entrepreneurs Recovery. We want to go far and deep, and we maybe want to get to places that we've never been before, talked about publicly. And so I'd love to start with just letting the audience know your story. So wherever you'd like to begin, and maybe catch us up to where you are today, and then I'll just come and interrupt you at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I think I have a story kind of that is similar to a lot of people's story who come into the psychedelic space. That you have some sort of major life event, life issue, and then go to psychedelic medicine, and then all of a sudden your life goes in a completely different direction, one that you're happy with. So I'm a physician, and I was trained in internal medicine and then infectious disease. And I had worked as an infectious disease consultant all over the country. We moved around a lot for my husband's training. My husband does orthopedic oncology. And every place that we lived, I went and got a job. So I've learned many different hospital systems and seen many different manifestations of infectious diseases. And in the pandemic, actually, I was an infectious disease consultant as well. And I ended up starting my own COVID consulting practice. And I was already burnt out before the pandemic happened. And then when I did this COVID consulting practice, I was doing business risk mitigation, helping companies stay open, and flying all over the country. When I was like the only person on an airplane with my business partner, and traveled to California, helped those docs there, and really had like the COVID physician experience where I was in hospitals where there were morgue trucks outside. I had my colleagues were on ventilators, like all the things. And as an infectious disease doc in a viral pandemic, it's not just that's your job. It's that you get hit every place. So it's your work, it's your home life, it's your friends. Everyone's calling you all the time. And I was really looking for something else to do. I was burnt out and I was just over it. And I started learning about psychedelic assisted therapy. I heard about the training programs that were out there, and I just applied to one. I was like, I don't know what is going to happen here, but I'm really interested in this. I had no plan at all. And in the beginning of, I signed up for a training course in Boulder. And at the beginning of the course, what happened is that Rick Doblin comes on and says, listen, if you are interested in working with these medicines, then you need to experience them for yourself. And at that same time, my little brother and my father were going to Costa Rica to drink ayahuasca at Rhythmia. And so I decided I'm going to go do that also. And I went to Rhythmia, and it was an amazing experience, very challenging, as you know how that could be. My first experience was brutal and major ego dissolution, and everything that I was afraid of was presented to me. And I remember in the morning, when you do the share after ceremony, I was listening to all these people saying all these amazing stories, like, oh, I learned about what happened to me when I was younger, and I was able to forgive that person who hurt me, and I learned, and then I witnessed all of creation, and I went back to Africa, and all these things, and I'm just sitting there like, are you kidding me? Like, I had the worst night of my entire life. I literally described this feeling of just being in a shit toilet. Like I was just in a shit toilet, and I didn't want to go back. And I was looking at flights to go home and get me out of here. And luckily I stayed, and it changed my life. It completely changed everything in my life. I ended up completing that psychedelic assisted therapy training course, and I learned a lot while I was in that program. I learned that the training courses are too expensive. I learned that they're too long. And I felt like I was in these training courses. I was in the first cohort at this program, and I was in it with mostly therapists. And I kept thinking, like, these therapists already know probably 90% of what we're being taught here. And that must be really frustrating because they had to pay $7,000 for this experience. And I looked at that, the cost of these training programs is a huge barrier to entry for a lot of the therapists that want to go into this space. And then I realized I can go into this space. And what I wanted to do initially was, I said, during COVID, I got a medical license in almost every state, 49 states, because I was doing at-home testing, and I wanted to do it above board. So I went and got all of these medical licenses. And so I decided I was going to utilize those medical licenses and start a company called Skylight Psychedelics, where we do telemedicine ketamine prescribing, but I only prescribe it to be used in a therapist's office. Because I was seeing companies like Mind Bloom and other places that were just sending whopping doses of ketamine to people's homes, and they're using it in unsupported environments, and that I felt like it wasn't safe. And so I started doing that. And then I decided, before I launched Skylight, I said, listen, I want to also make sure that the therapists that are sitting with my clients know what they're doing. And I wanted to honor their existing training, and I wanted to provide a ketamine-assisted therapy course that was online and self-paced and affordable. I put my training program out there for $500, and I wrote every single word of that program myself and with my former partner, who's an addiction psychiatrist, and also some therapists. And so it was really important to me that the people that were sitting with my patients on the medicine knew what I thought was important and what I took away from my training from my experiences, and I wanted to keep my clients safe. So that's really how I ended up in this space. And I think it's really important. I think that when you send big doses of ketamine to someone's house, that you're going to increase the potential for addiction because they're not doing this in a supported environment. And I think that, it's obviously very important to have someone with people when they're on the medicine, because we get a lot of clients that have had experiences by themselves and they get traumatized, right? And there's no one there to help them with the integration and to help them really talk through their experience. So.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Cause I want to come into your story a little bit deeper, but yeah, we're definitely going to get into this whole idea of at-home ketamine without any type of integration support. I mean, except maybe through Zoom. I know they have like some type of Zoom correspondence, but you still have the ketamine in your hand, right? You still have the ketamine. So, and recently I spoke with a doctor of addiction medicine in Atlanta, and she lost a close friend of hers to a ketamine overdose with using Mind Bloom. So, this stuff really hits home, and people reach out to me and tell me these stories. And she was actually interested in the proper ketamine-assisted training for her when she opens up a clinic. So, ironically enough, that was right around the time I met you. So, I think the world is calling for this, and I think look at how we're handling really it's not a psychedelic, but look at how we're handling the first thing that's, legal for us to play with here in the United States. It's kind of the wild, wild west. I mean, and it can be extremely beneficial. I know firsthand, but it's kind of wild out there. So
It's wild out there. And I think that, another one of the issues with companies like Mind Bloom is the dosing that they send people. I have a friend who did Mind Bloom, and she was getting 1,500 milligrams of ketamine. The maximum I prescribe is 550. You don't need that big dose. And what they ask people to do is they say, put it in your mouth for a certain amount of time, hold it there, and then spit it out. But what happens if your client accidentally swallows it? That's a huge experience.
Wow.
So
that is a big dose.
We
That's
do
a
a
big
small
dose.
We do incremental dosing. I start people off at a low dose. Meet the medicine.
Yeah.
Trust the process. See what you're doing before you get blasted out there. Because a lot of people don't have the tools to deal with that. And yes, Mind Bloom does offer some Zoom session support, but not all of them. And also there's tons of independent prescribers who just give people ketamine without any direction at all.
Absolutely.
So one of the other reasons why I'm in this space is because one of my best friends from medical school, he's a radiation oncologist, suffered lifelong depression, anxiety, OCD, and was on multiple different medications and was suicidal. And he wrote me a suicide note. And we were able to work with his providers to taper down his medications. We got him treated with ketamine, and after the 4th dose of ketamine, he was no longer suicidal. So you can read about all of it in the literature, but also when it happens to you and you see it save your best friend's life, it's.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really important point. I think that you can hear about it, you can read about it, but when you firsthand experience it, which I have firsthand, and not only for myself, for some of the closest people to me, and me helping them through my trainings I went through, that where I met doctors who had ketamine clinics that I trusted, that had incredible integration support and training, and then handing people off to those people and watching their lives transform, because they had already been through the addiction recovery process. They were well beyond that. Now they were just living life, but they still had these symptoms that were still there, this nervous system trauma that was still showing up despite all of the work they've done.
Yeah.
And ketamine-assisted therapy helped them to break through that with integration. So, I'm very fortunate to be in Costa Rica and have that type of informed mindset, because here in Costa Rica, and I don't blame them, a lot of people are really into natural medicine, like psilocybin, ayahuasca. When you mention ketamine, it's like, So I'm really grateful that I was able to see that firsthand, experience that firsthand, and have conversations like that with you, so that we can sort of, talk about the ways that we can approach this, because it's happening, it's blowing up, it's only getting bigger. And how does a country like even Costa Rica deal with something like that? So this is a really important subject which you're an expert in, so I'm excited to dive into the stuff
Yeah.
that you're doing at
Yeah.
Skylight and
I,
the
th- I,
trainings.
I think also one of the things that you were mentioning is having your own experience with the medicine, right? Especially as a provider and someone who is holding ceremonies. And when you're training people, you explain that to them. Listen, it's really important if you're able to have these experiences that you have them, right? Because so where you obviously don't ever know really where your client's going to go, but you have a general idea of realm traveling, really, right? And experiencing that deep healing for yourself. And so that I think is a critical component that people don't serve medicine unless they've had that medicine themselves. And obviously you get into an issue where there are some people who have a medical contraindication and they can't do it, right? And so in that case, I always recommend people try and have a breathwork experience or a different kind of experience that is going to foster a non-ordinary state of consciousness, so they're able to really try to tap into what that person may be going through. And I think also ketamine, the word like we use the word gateway a lot when we talk about marijuana as the gateway to the cocaine, the heroin, the fentanyl, and all this stuff. And I think people a lot in this space are using ketamine as, we call it the gateway medicine for the plants. Right. And I think that's what happens for a lot of people. And I see it all the time because I see my own clients and they have this trust in modern medicine, and they know that this is a safe medicine, and that, you're in a supported environment, and there's a doctor who's prescribing it to you, and there's all these safety measures in place with that. And then they have these experiences and they see what this healing is like. And then all of a sudden they're open to the plants. And so I think that all of these providers of ketamine really need to be well versed in all of the plants that people may be, seeking out, really as for harm reduction or risk reduction mitigation, because you should really be able to inform your clients and help them with, deciding, or kind of helping them, decide kind of where they want to go in that, and why, like what's calling to them and where are they going to go, right? Because there are tons of people out there serving medicine in places, and people are getting hurt all the time. And I can't tell you how many times I hear about, people doing psychedelic assisted therapy training and then holding ceremony and themselves having 5 grams of psilocybin. That's a that's a very different thing, right? That's a totally
Yeah.
different thing. And in ayahuasca ceremony, we sit there and we're never sitting there with anyone who's not on the medicine. Like that's something that we know that we're doing. And I think that psilocybin, can be similar to that, right? But there's not a lot of psilocybin elders out there. There's not a lot of people who've been working with psilocybin since the time they were 6 years old. Right? It's a completely different thing. And the medicine is different, right? When you take a big dose of psilocybin, the floor can fall out from underneath you. And so there needs to be a lot of education in the training space.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you have training through Skylight Psychedelics, and you train, licensed therapists and physicians and people who are wanting to get into ketamine-assisted therapy and open up a clinic. How many of those people that are taking the training have actually, one, done ketamine, and two, have done plants, have done the plant medicines? What percentage would you say have that experience?
I would say upwards of 90%. And just to
Good.
be clear, I'll train anyone, because I know that there are people out there who are not therapists, who are not physicians, that are holding ceremony. And the more information that you can give them, I think the less people are going to be hurt by this. When I prescribe ketamine, though, I only prescribe it to be used in a licensed and trained therapist office. So, but I mean, my psilocybin course is called a comprehensive harm reduction guide for the underground, like, because I know that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. And our
For
MDMA
sure.
course, the same thing. Like, we know MDMA is not legal, and we just lost that opportunity, and that it's going to be 3 or 4 something years until we have another chance at that. But I know people who are doing it. And so why not give them as much information as you could possibly give them?
Yeah, and I like how, one of the things that excited me was looking at your courses and seeing the prices. There's a lot less expensive. You have psychedelic integration training for $199, and you have Rape beginner's guide for $99. Like
Mm-hmm.
that seems pretty accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate that because I don't see that out there. And it's like a menu. It's because you
Right.
have them all right there. It's like there's Cambo, there's MDMA, and I feel like that's how we need to approach this space. There's so much stigma. There's so much like, well, you can do that, but not that, not MDMA assisted
Right.
therapy. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, why not? So I feel like you get that menu of courses and they're, reasonably priced. Some are very inexpensive in my opinion. And I really look at it like that. Like people are doing this anyways. People are doing it's like when I'm in this is space of addiction recovery, and a lot of people come to me and they have 30 years of AA and they're just like, they're going crazy and they're looking and they're hearing my podcast and going, hey, I want to come and I want to do some psychedelic assisted therapy. What do you recommend? And a lot of times the honest answer I want to tell them is like take one of your courses or like go educate yourself or like don't go and do 5-MeO DMT. Like
Right.
that is a big experience, and I would want that for them, but make sure that they understand what they're getting into. My life, there's my life before 5-MeO DMT. There's my life before ayahuasca. There's my life before MDMA assisted therapy. And there's my life after each one of those medicines. My life changed after each of those, even peyote. I did peyote, sacred peyote here in Costa Rica. My life changed after that. And
Yeah, drastically, right?
drastically. So,
Yeah, and
did they
you
tell
have
me
to
that?
inform people. You have to inform
Exactly.
people. You're going to bring people into a ceremony. You're going to give someone a medicine. You have to inform them and tell them all of the things that you feel could potentially happen, right? Because if someone comes into your ceremony space and all of a sudden they're in a place where they can't hear you and they can't communicate with you and they're in a rough spot and then they come out of that and you didn't tell them that could happen, like they're going to be pretty pissed and traumatized, right? And
Yeah.
not because if you don't tell them that, they're not giving informed consent. They're giving consent, but it's not informed, right? And yet, yes, you
That's
can't
right.
tell someone all the different possible places that they could go because you don't even know, right? Like you can, I mean, I've been in over 100 psilocybin ceremonies, over 100, and so many ayahuasca ceremonies, and every single time is different. Every time you see something totally different. People lose the ability to talk. They can't speak English all of a sudden. They can't control their body. They're flailing around. They all of a sudden someone becomes homicidal or suicidal, and all those things can happen. And
Definitely.
you have to tell them.
I have this question. I speak to doctors who obviously are licensed and medical doctors, and they say to me, I don't want to talk about this because I don't want to lose my license. But here you are, and you're completely open about this. So tell me how that's possible, and tell me what you can tell to those doctors that are, some of them are in the ketamine space and they're afraid to talk about their journeys because of their license. What would you say to someone like
I
that?
think that, I mean, I live in the state of Colorado, and so I've had medicine experiences. It's decriminalized here. I've been to places where it's decriminalized. My ayahuasca experiences, I mean, here in Colorado, you can have ayahuasca experiences. I think there are tons of doctors who are now coming out talking about all of this stuff because it's almost like you can't not because when you see it for your own self and you see it helping other people. I mean, for people to realize a trauma that happened to them, that they were molested as a child, and then for them not to just realize that, but then to find forgiveness for the person that did it to them. It's like, otherwise you're just, if you don't get to that place, right, then you're living your life with depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, you're suicidal, and then you're taking all these other medications that render you kind of like a zombie. This is what a lot of my clients say to me, like, listen, I want to get off these SSRIs because I want to feel something. I don't feel like a human being, and so it's you cannot deny the power of these medicines, like that they're And these doctors know. And I mean, I can't tell this, the community here in Colorado is, I mean, you know, it's attending physicians bringing their residents to a ceremony. Like, that's what's happening now. You know, and they're actually like talking for real about what happened to themselves and to each other, and connecting on a completely different level. Like, medicine is changing. Modern medicine is changing because the doctors and the therapists, like, they're going to these experiences. And when you go there, you can't unsee what you saw, right? You can't unsee it.
Yeah. It's, I'm really grateful to be having this conversation with you, with your experiences and training, because these are the types of things that I try to tell a lot of people. Like, we're not talking about getting high on MDMA. We're not talking about just, getting high at your house and ketamine. People do that, but that's not what we're talking about. Like, I'm talking about guided ceremonies with trained guides who are informed in this, who are walking you through an 8-hour experience with pre-integration and post-integration. It's completely life-changing. It can be completely life-changing. And even in those ceremonies where there's trained guides, you could still be destabilized. You could still have a destabilizing experience. I've had them. But the good news is that I could understand and I could integrate that destabilizing experience through my own education, but also through support. And so it just makes me excited that you're as excited as I am with the potential of this. It's not the end all be all. It's not like telling I feel like when I come on this podcast and I talk, all the people from AA I knew are like, see, he's trying to get me to do drugs. And it's like, no, I'm not. I'm simply telling you what my last 3 years of has been like. After 15 years of being in AA, all in, to go 3 years into the psychedelic therapy realm, very guided, very informed, many interviews like this, and going into very large experiences, which I was beyond scared. I was at the point where I was calling in guides that I didn't even know I had, because I was so scared right before I was about to do a 5-MeO DMT experience. Like, that's how scared I was. I was so scared. And luckily I was in the right environment and I had really great guidance. And also, I also had support ongoing that would be continuing support. And my life is dedicated to this space to understand it. And so, I hope people are listening to this episode to be like, this is a world that is ever expanding. It's been around for a while, but it is expanding, and people are, I have people now, I don't know about you, I have new people reaching out now that I'm telling you that have 20, 30, 40 years of sobriety that are having meltdowns, deterioration, with sponsoring dozens of people, therapy, everything you can imagine. And now they're coming to psychedelic assisted therapy because they are like, they literally, this is their exact words. I was called, I had to do it. And then I saw what the matrix was, and I was like, I'm so happy for you, and and it's so, I don't know what you're seeing, but I'm seeing a lot of that lately.
Yeah, I see a ton of it. And and it makes sense, right? Because so I'm very involved in the AA community. I've been to tons of meetings. I did a year-long workshop. Like, I some of my closest people in my life are in AA, and AA saved their life, right? Saved their life. And I get how it works. And one of the major components, obviously, is the community, right? You need that community, and psychedelics also offer that. But what's different in AA compared to psychedelics is that just like it is in any other form of healing, not psychedelic therapy, but there's a limit to how far you go. It's what you can recall, right? What you remember that happened to you, what you remember in terms of the people that you hurt, right? But when you go into the psychedelic world, you're able to go underneath all of that and really go to the root of all the places, like all of the pain. And so it makes sense that you're in AA and you're going to plateau and you're going to reach a place where a lot of people feel like they become suicidal, right? That's what happens to a lot of people who are struggling, who maintain sobriety for such a long time. And then they're like, okay, now what? because they weren't able to access the deep rooted stuff, right? That spiritual experience that is critical to AA, right? And no one in the book, in the big book, talks about Bill Wilson's experiences with LSD, and that they weren't just recreational, let's just go drop some acid, but he was doing psychedelic assisted therapy with LSD multiple times, right? And so I know a ton of people in the AA community, speakers at the meetings, big pillars of the community, and they're drinking ayahuasca and they can't tell anybody. Right? This is a very common thing that's happening. They're sitting in psilocybin ceremony and they're healing themselves and dealing with their deep wounds, and they can't share it because they believe, and many people in the community believe, that if you take anything that affects you from the neck up, that you're doing drugs again, you're no longer sober.
Yeah.
Right? But it's all because these medicines were misclassified as drugs. That's it. You know, if someone just created some pharmaceutical thing and we didn't know anything about the plants, and this pharmaceutical allowed you to tap into the deep roots of your life and your history and your trauma, they'd all be allowed to take it because a doctor said that they could take it, right? But it's like, if you just look at it, like, these plants were classified as drugs, and they're not drugs, they're medicines. And so it's so important to shift that. And listen, you can get addicted to ketamine for sure. That just happened to one of my closest friends. One of my closest friends just got addicted to ketamine. Addiction to non-ordinary state of consciousness, that's a real thing. That can happen to people. And that's why it's so important that you do. This one friend was just blasting off on ketamine all the time, not doing any work, no integration, no support, by herself. And that's how that happens, right? But when you like, for me, when I prescribe ketamine, the maximum amount of ketamine I will prescribe someone is 12 doses. And I know your therapist, and your therapist knows that I prescribed you the medicine. And if you take that ketamine outside of your therapist's office, I know about it. And then you're discharged from the practice. Like, we need that, right? We need those kind of things. And when you talk about the other plants and the addiction potential, I mean, come on, like, that's not, I mean, there's not a lot of people out there that are addicted to ayahuasca, right? Like, we know that's a really challenging experience. It's hard
unless they're building a super ego of God and a cult, then that would be really a good addiction to build a ayahuasca cult.
And I think that can happen also when you're in an environment that, you're not sitting with a taita. You're sitting with someone who doesn't have the lineage and isn't able to see what's going on.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I'm seeing emerge, like in the space of 5-MeO-DMT with the pens. So they have 5-MeO-DMT pens, which you can take low range to mid range doses. And you can also go full release, which can be very dangerous if you're by yourself to ever do a 5-MeO-DMT by yourself. But people have pens, and what's happening is they're taking those low to medium range doses, and they're doing it every day or every other day. And they're becoming like, I want to become one with God in spirit, but it becomes this, there's no integration of that. And it becomes your kind of like a super ego developing. And again, like, is that super common happening? No, I mean, not everyone is doing 5-MeO with, and has access to a pen, but many are. And it's just, we just want to talk about this. That's the point of all of it. It's like, let's talk about this. In 2018, I'm sitting there with, I don't know how many years of sobriety, 16, 15 years of sobriety, AA, all in. I was outside the box a little bit, but there's no way I was doing psychedelics. And I bumped into Dr. Dan Engel after he spoke. And I said to him, hey, why would someone with all this sobriety time that I have, or someone with 30 years, why would they ever do MDMA-assisted therapy or ayahuasca? And he looks at me, he was like literally confused. He's like, why wouldn't they? He's like, you're expanding your intuition. You're going deeper into your spirit. That's why I serve people who are like that. And I'm like, whoa, my mind was blown. And that was the seed that got planted that took another 3 years to germinate for me to come in and then decide, after I wrote a book on addiction recovery without psychedelics, I was now ready. I had released that out of me. I was now ready to come into the next sphere of my healing. And like you said, I just looked at my journal. I like to write. I looked at my journal from this year. And in February, I did a ketamine-assisted therapy. I did ketamine-assisted therapy for myself. And I wrote down what I was looking to get out of the journey. And everything that I wrote down in detail happened. Everything that I wrote happened. Now, is that going to happen for everyone? No, but it did. Everything. I wrote down, I want to find a therapist that specializes in the things that I have the most struggle with, which is codependency, giving myself away, the empath giving themselves to every person, the people-pleasing addiction. That's how I got love as a child. So I wrote that down. I also wrote down moving. I wrote down all these things of like where I was going to move. And all of it came to pass. But why? I ended up finding that therapist. I ended up having the integration support. I ended up having that, but it all came through. And so it's for me not to share that, which is the first time I've shared that live. It's like criminal to me. It's like that was a huge piece of an access I couldn't get to in my conscious mind or with meditation. I meditate every single day. I have a Vipassana practice. I meditate sometimes up to an hour per session, and I can't access that in my meditations. I can't access that through my cold plunges. I do daily cold plunges. I can access that through these certain non-ordinary states of experiences or consciousness through these medicines. So it's, I like to share that to say like, yes, and obviously you can abuse it. You can get addicted to it. You know, just like you can get addicted to the foods that we're often eating, and we can get addicted to our own, honestly, our own nervous system's way of keeping us safe. I mean, that's another way of being addicted, is to, you know, acting in a certain way because that's how you receive love as a child. And then you're staying in that pattern, and then you're getting into relationships and repeating the patterns. And how do you break out of those cycles when you've already done all these therapies? You've already done all this stuff. It's just another tool, you know?
And I really, that's why I strongly believe that you have to have the safeguards in place to minimize the risk of addiction, right? You have to, there's so many different ways to minimize that from happening to someone, right?
Let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about that.
The community, your psychedelic community, that community is so important, right? Just like the community in AA, like you have people that are with you and watching you and can offer you support, right? And when prescribing ketamine, like it's so important to give a certain amount of medicine. And I say to every one of my clients who come back for a reevaluation, who want to do more ketamine, I tell them the same thing every time. More medicine is not always the answer. Are you doing the work? Right? Are you doing the work? Because most people, we do the medicine and we say, well, I'm going to go do the work. And we think we're in the journey and we're doing the work. And we know that we are doing it, right? It's gnarly in there sometimes and so hard. And that's a certain part of the work. But the work is here in this realm. It's taking what you have seen and learned and applying it here. And so when you're not doing the work and you're just buzzing around from ceremony to ceremony, you got to check yourself. Like, what are you doing? Right? You have to be talking about it and really that integrating it, right? We always say you got to do the integration. Because I can't tell you how many times there's people like, oh, well, I tried ketamine and now I'm going to do MDMA and then I'm going to go 5-MeO and then I got to go do Iboga, like, and you're just like, well, what are you doing? Like, what are you getting? What are you getting? And why do you keep going back? And what's your goal? What's your intention? Are you showing up with an intention, or are you just wanting to blast off to just go, to outer space and beyond? It's like, you gotta show up with an intention. You have to go to a place that is really honoring what you're doing, right? And that vetting is so important, right? The vetting of the person who's holding the ceremony. And I've been to ayahuasca ceremony where it's not a taita. It's someone who, learned this here. And, what people don't understand is that when you're in the medicine ceremony, you're drinking yahe and you're there with a taita. That taita's job is not just to make sure that you don't get into a dark spiral hole and come over with the waira and get you out of it, right? They're communing with the spirits. Like, there is a lineage of taitas lined up behind them that are there in that ceremony space with you, right? So, and once you have that experience, and you have a different kind of experience, you know that you're not held. You know that container is not sealed and is not tight. And it's so critical to have those relationships with the people that really, the Taita that we sit with, Taita Cesar from Jungle Harmony, from Colombia. He's been drinking medicine since 6 years old, serving it since he was 15 years old.
Yeah.
It's like you go to these ceremony spaces where there's 100 people in ceremony to some places, right? And people are tied up. People don't even know that. They don't even know that they might tie you up, right? Cesar served almost 10,000 people, has never tied anyone up in ceremony. Why? Because he knows how to hold the space, and because he doesn't have a huge container of people that he cannot hold, right? It's so important to have that person who knows the medicine, and the generations behind them know the medicine, right?
Yeah, I have all kinds of thoughts because, you're making me...
I'm very passionate about that.
Well, it's because, that doesn't really get talked about a lot. It's like you're messing with the energetics here. You're messing with realms that we can't understand. And I know this is getting into a little bit of esoteric stuff, but what do you think these shaman are doing? There's light and dark. There are entities, there are things coming into you that are real. And that's why people go, I'm never going to drink it. I don't want to even. And it's like, I understand that because that is real. And when you have someone who is trained to hold that sacred space and not bring in that dark energy, and some of it is okay and welcome, but some of it's not. And it's invited into those circles because they're loose and leaky energy. And so it kind of got me thinking, though, what happens in the ketamine world when someone is giving you intramuscular ketamine or IV assisted ketamine, and their energy is like that, and they're not holding this space? It just gets me thinking, because people have this, when people think of ketamine, like, oh, that's a drug, that's not a plant, that's not, even though that you can find ketamine in nature, they don't think of it as natural. So I've never thought of that. But what do you think about, practitioners, facilitators who are administering ketamine, and there's no lineage, there's no, how do we address that in the trainings with sort of the light and dark, as we're talking about in the ayahuasca ceremonies?
I think it's different with the plants versus ketamine. It's different, right? Because when we're working with plants, there's an essence, and this is also something that isn't talked about in a lot of the training programs, right? Is that a lot of the training programs are kind of like, well, this is a tool, and we're going to use this, and it's going to make us better, and like that's not our training at all, right? Our training, when we talk about the plants, this is a spirit and a plant essence, and you're communing with it. And we are not healing you. You are working with the teacher, that is the plant, and you are healing yourself. And ketamine, I feel like, I actually had this conversation recently with someone, and that, they asked me, is there a spirit of the ketamine? Is there a ketamine spirit? And I feel like there is, but I feel like it's a human spirit, right? This is a human-made medicine that we're working with, but there's no lineage, right? There's no real kind of lineage behind you. And so I think that, and I don't know how to kind of fit that in. Like, I think they're two different things, but I think that, when the provider is sitting there with someone on ketamine, when the facilitator is sitting there with someone on ketamine, you have to be full on present. You got to know when that person's nostrils flare, and when they sigh, and when they clench up. Like, you have to be present. There are a lot of people who, are sitting there eating and texting on their phone and reading something, and like, that's not, you're not there. You're not in the medicine with the person. And so there's things that I think are similar with the plants and ketamine, but I think there's a little bit of a difference there with, obviously there's a lack of a lineage and a lack of kind of really trying to put your finger on the spirit of that medicine.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, it's not like I'm a well-seasoned decades upon decades of plant medicines, but from my experience, which has been pretty robust, and I would say that feels right, that ketamine has more of like a human spirit. And for me, ketamine can access the highest parts of yourself, your higher self, or whatever you want to call it, your spirit. But it also really gets to this, it gets to this level of my brain. And I've heard it say, I think Zappy Zappel, I heard him say, like, ketamine can activate 80 to 85% of your brain. And we're not obviously operating on a normal consciousness level like that, maybe 5 to 10%. Who really knows? How do we even measure that? But if that is true, then ketamine is accessing parts and memories, which has been the biggest healer for me in ketamine-assisted therapy, is it's accessing memories. And my memories, I can see them from a new lens. And when I access them from that lens, because I'm more conscious, I'm not gone in another dimension, I'm here, I actually can almost see the story clearer and truer and unravel it. And I've had this happen where I've seen childhood memories that I thought were one way. And on ketamine assisted therapy, on ketamine, I could actually see them in a different way. And I had just started bawling my eyes out because I could finally heal. I could finally forgive that person because I could see myself in that person in a very clear, true way, not because I was high on ketamine, none of that. And especially my dose I was on, it was a smaller dose sublingually. So there's just a lot to be researched here. There's a lot to understand. There's a lot more conversations to be had, and really getting this information out there to be able to share this in a way that's not a panacea, that can be balanced, but also truthful, that there's huge potential that hasn't even been tapped into. And if we're going to tap into it, we want trained guides. We want people who know what they're doing, because the result could be death. It could be addiction, for sure.
For sure.
So yeah. So, wow, we just went on a massive rant,
Do this
which
all
was
day,
cool.
I feel like.
Yeah. So, I'm curious about your upcoming, like, what is next for Skylight Psychedelics? So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be looking up your courses and checking them out. But like, what are you currently looking to manifest right now? What's like the highest intentions for you right now?
Yeah. So right now I'm actually bringing in new partners, which is really exciting. So we just had a seed round, and we're bringing these new partners. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be offering a live psilocybin course. So to get people certified in psilocybin assisted therapy in the state of Colorado. We're going to open up a licensed healing center here in Evergreen, and be offering not just ketamine, but psilocybin as well. And like I said, I think, one of the main differences between my training program and other training programs is really talking about the importance of honoring the indigenous, connecting with the spirit of the medicine, when we're talking about the plants, and knowing that, we don't, in our training, we really encourage the client to set the pace for the journey, right? And to go where they feel like going, and not pushing anyone to go into any particular place, not guiding them down this particular route. It's really allowing it's them and the medicine, and we are there to hold the container, hold the space to the best of our ability. And I also, when I'm teaching people about psilocybin, is, who's your teacher, right? It's not just this training course, right? Find an elder, find someone who has this experience in this lineage, and they can teach you all that they've seen and all that they know. And definitely, if it's possible for you to have these experiences on your own, to have those experiences on your own. And, we plan in Colorado, you can be a licensed training facility. And then we also plan to be able to do the sessions with people, where the practicum, right? So when you are sitting there and learning how to work with these medicines. And again, like, I just feel whenever someone says the word, use this plant, like, we don't use plants, and we work with them. There, it's a whole entity that you're communing with. And the ketamine, back to the ketamine for a minute, the ketamine, all of these medicines, they do the same thing, right? They're connecting you with your inner knowing, your inner healing intelligence. People ask me, like, how does this medicine work? And yes, like there's science and there's neurotransmitters and there's neuroplasticity and all these things, but the bottom line is the same. It's all the same. It's the ketamine is very similar, right, to the ayahuasca and the iboga and all these things, because it allows you to connect and remove everything else around you and allows you to connect with your own knowing. And that's how you're healing yourself, right? Yes, we have the benefits of the neuroplasticity and all of these other great things, right? But that's what we're doing. And so when you have, you have a company like Joyous, for instance. Joyous gives you low dose ketamine every day. Well, where's the experience? Where's you're not going in anywhere. You're not going in and connecting with your inner knowing. You're having like the other potential benefits of, and we don't know the data. We don't know like how much neuroplasticity you get from daily ketamine, but you're not having the experience, right? And so that, I read an article about that they have psychedelic medicines kind of that do all the psychedelic stuff, but without the experience. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, yes, if you have a person who is afraid and won't go to the psychedelic experience, sure, why not help them to feel better, right? But the psychedelic experience, in my opinion, is just a critical piece of this. So we're really building out all of our different, we're working with Anthea. Anthea is an insurance provider. They cover ketamine-assisted therapy, so through people's employers. So if anyone who's listening is interested in, if you're an employer and you're interested in providing ketamine-assisted therapy as a mental health benefit, then call Anthea. And we're one of Anthea's main prescribers. And so that's obviously an important thing, is to get this to be more affordable for people. So we're really building out lots of different things, the ketamine prescribing, the training. I mean, every day I feel like I'm doing another training course. And, the one on ayahuasca we have I'm not teaching you how to serve ayahuasca. That's not what's happening. I'm teaching people about what I wish I knew before I went and had my first experience. All of the different things about, what's the dieta, what are they burning in the ceremony? What's the mambe that they have in their mouth? Like, what is all of it? What's the meaning of it? And how to vet a ceremony space, like all of these different things. And the same with the Kambo. Like, I'm not teaching someone how to become a Kambo practitioner, right? A lot of them are educational courses.
Well, so, I can do your 5-MeO one, because you don't have a 5-MeO course. What to expect.
I don't yet. I've had 5-MeO. I've had 5-MeO, and like all the medicines, I have a deep respect for all of them. And I think, they all have their benefits, but they all, it's a big warning. You gotta be in, you have to be in the right mindset to be able to handle that experience. And you have to be with the people who can support you, and you have to be with them not only before that, during that, but also after that. Right. And you know, it's, you got to know why you're going. Why are you showing up? What are you looking for?
Yeah. It's, when people ask, which they don't always ask because they're scared, of these medicines. But when they are ready, they're ready. When they say to me, hey, I'm very interested in this and very interested, it's like, okay, you're being called to the medicine. Right. And people who are not called, they may be curious or skeptical, and that's great. That's awesome. And I think when you're called to it, you're called to it. And some people, it's not about a calling, it's about life and death. Like, they are literally on the brink, and they have tried everything, and they could have, there's people with chronic fentanyl addiction who's working with ibogaine and 5-MeO and even ayahuasca, and they are getting better. So I know these people, I know these facilitators serving these people. It's a really crazy situation. There's a crazy things happening out there. And these medicines are being utilized above ground, below ground, to help these people. But we're, ultimately, someone listening to this podcast maybe is not struggling with a fentanyl addiction, but they're probably listening. Maybe they're an entrepreneur. Maybe they're, they don't consider themselves in recovery, but they might be saying, I'm definitely have recovered from sex addiction, or I definitely recovered from my childhood trauma of my dad bullying me, so, they may be looking to psychedelics for a different reason, maybe because they're sick of what they're doing. They've reached the pinnacle of what they've done in real estate or whatever category they're in. And now they're just looking to see, like, what else is there? I know there's something, a greater calling, but it's going to come from within. And accessing these medicines is going to show you from within what is who you are and what's in there. And that's scary to go inside to know what's in, and maybe to know what's out too. And I think that, as we get to bigger medicines like ayahuasca or 5-MeO or even psilocybin at high doses, like you're gonna, you're in for a big experience. And we want to make sure that you have someone who's a trained guide who is going to help you to guide you through that, no matter what the experience looks like. So I'm just so grateful that you exist, Skylight Psychedelic exists, and that you're so open about this, because you're the first person I've talked to with a medical license that's a medical doctor that's talking about the spirits of the medicine. I've never heard that. And I believe that, but I can say that freely, but I'd never have heard it from someone with your, with your background. And so thank you for saying that. And sticking behind that. I think that's really big.
I feel like when we are communing with the plants and we're engaging with those spirits, that we work for the medicine, right? And it's our duty to share that information, right? I feel very strongly about that, and that, and that's what I talk to people about, is that, you've come to this medicine space, you're going to have this experience with this plant, this fungus, and you're going to see what it does, and then it's your duty to share it, and then to share it in a very intentional, authentic way, right?
Yeah, if someone was listening to this show and they were like, well, where could I start? I'm curious, maybe they're in their late 70s, like, man, I don't know. I'm kind of curious about psilocybin or something. Or maybe they're just long-term AA and they're like, you know what, I want to learn more secretly. I want to look up and learn. What would be the first course that they should look at, do you think? Or should it just be based on the medicine they're curious about?
I think I honestly, when a lot of people ask me kind of what are good resources, and I feel like, sometimes people don't even know, it's not like a particular plant is calling, they just have a curiosity. And I honestly think that Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, I read that, and I feel like it's a great place for people to start. And if someone isn't a reader and wants to watch it on Netflix, I think this is really helpful. And then they can learn kind of very surface level information. And sometimes more than surface level information. And then you kind of get an idea of what medicine you're interested in. And, for us, like I have a community harm reduction psilocybin course that's on my website. Also, I think that people learn a lot from there. But if they're interested in, working with the medicine, not just for themselves, but for other people, then, my ketamine course and the psilocybin course and the MDMA course. But the courses that I have also for people who are just interested in the medicines, the Cambo, the ayahuasca, the rapé. Listen, I feel very strongly like the part of the reason why I have the rapé course is because I don't want to see rapé in a bodega hanging up there with a caripe. I want people to really, I was at a party not like maybe a year ago, and someone was blowing rapé in my kitchen. And I'm like, that's not, for me, it's ceremonial and it's sacred. And, we don't want these medicines to become like a cigarette, right? As people are communing with the spirit of tobacco every day, all over this country and all over this world, and they have no idea. It's just part of this global disconnect that we have going on, right? Like, ask a kid what's in a hot dog. Like, a kid doesn't even know that that's even an animal. Like, there's this disconnection. And so we're trying to preserve that. And that's why we built the rapé course, is so people aren't just using. It's a different thing that we're really trying to get people to get behind.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that. That's good. I mean, there is a sacredness to it. And, I think, with all the things happening and it becoming legal therapeutically, different medicines and stuff, maybe we'll lose some of the sacredness to it. But I think that, all we can do is inform people of where this comes from, even if it doesn't have a lineage, still understanding that, you are dealing with really big instruments. You're dealing with not just your nervous system, not just your brain, not just your basal ganglia, not just your neocortex.
No, this is the
We're
force of
dealing
Mother
with
Nature.
Mother Nature, forces that are very strong. And
Yeah.
and people who have done that, and that's why I think facilitators should be required to have their own experiences and ceremonies so that they can understand when things can go sour. They can understand what doses things can go sour, that trying at different doses and seeing what happens at different types of experiences, because people can have really challenging experiences at different doses. So I think, I think this is all incredibly important, and I'm really excited to share this with the world, and then be able to bring you back on again when you're in the next frontier of Skylight Psychedelics and your work and where it's going.
I'm going to come to Costa Rica. We'll do something together live.
Let's do it. I got the equipment. And so for my listeners that are tuning in, is there anything like that you want to offer the listeners, maybe for your courses or all the things you have offered on your site?
Yeah, so we have all the training courses listed at skylightpsychedelics.com. Also, one of the important things is that anyone who's taking our training courses, the ketamine, psilocybin, MDMA, you have access to our biweekly Zooms for free. So there's a therapist, Elizabeth Wolfson, who leads these Zooms, provides community. And so you have this community, this support system. So if you're working with someone or you had your own experience and want to talk about it, we do integration for therapists also, and non-therapists who are working with these medicines. And so you have this supportive environment. We also have a discount code that we can give 20% off. I think it's Skylight. Is it Skylight 20? I think it's Skylight 20.
Skylight 20, capital S.
Skylight 20 is a discount code that you guys can use for 20% off of the training courses. And look out for our live psilocybin course that's going to be coming soon. And I think that's probably it.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the show notes, of course. And well, Dana, it's been a real pleasure, this conversation. I feel like we're going to talk for another hour or two. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for checking out Entrepreneurs in Recovery podcast. We are so appreciative that you are here. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes and Spotify so more people can find the show. Once again, thank you so much. We have great episodes and content come out in the future. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.